Welcome, this is a recorded session of the Post-Quantum Cryptography Conference of the PKI Consortium. This conference would not have been possible without our sponsors, PQ Shield, SSL.com, Entrust, Keyfactor, HID Global, and the organizational support of the Post-Quantum Cryptography Working Group of the PKI Consortium, and in particular, Entrust, Keyfactor, and Logius. Would you like to join the PKI Consortium? Go to pkic.org/join, or contact us if you would like to become a sponsor.
So without further ado, I get to introduce the next speaker. I call him Captain America, just because he and I had a chance to present once, and I sent him a little thank you gift as him done up as Captain America. So this is Jeff Stapleton. Jeff Stapleton is Executive Director, Cybersecurity Research at Wells Fargo. That's a mouthful. And Jeff is really a true veteran of security in general, but especially as it relates to financial services, having spent over 40 years focusing on cryptography. Jeff has also authored a series of books called Security Without Obscurity, and they really showcase his commitment to transparent and robust security practices. So without further ado, Jeff, welcome you to the stage.
And is this on? Excellent. And then we're going to change this up a little bit. I'm adding another speaker. We're doing a mini panel. So Ralph, if you could come up. We're going to add Ralph Poor, and I'll explain here in just a second and see if we can move forward. So Blair made the comment, oops, and I did the same thing. Everybody does. That everyone knows who I am. Well, that's not true. So I put some information here. So clearly I do work for Wells Fargo. I am the working group chair of the Cybersecurity Work Group. I've been doing X9 standards for about 30 years. That's where Ralph and I met. You've been doing, can we get a mic for Ralph? Chris, can we get a microphone for Ralph? Thank you. You've been doing X9 stuff a little bit longer than I have, I think.
I've been working with X9 since 1986.
There you go. So that predates me.
And I'm the vice chair of their cryptographic tools and standards group and X9F1.
So along with doing the X9 standards, we've been doing a lot of work in the ISO TC68 space, which is financial services. As mentioned, I am an author. I've got articles, books, and in fact, one article I wanted to mention, Ralph and I authored a IEEE paper on cryptographic transitions in 2006. So we've been thinking about this problem for a really long time. The books are out. Chris mentioned those. Thank you very much for that plug. Ralph has been my reviewer for all 5 of the books, and in fact, we are collaborating on book number 6. If you look me up on LinkedIn, I went ahead and put this up here. You will see I got the Wells Fargo Award. Yes, I do have over 100 patents. Thank you very much. Okay, here's a quick agenda. I'm going to talk about the Industry Standards Organization a little bit. How many folks here are familiar with X9 and know who the X9 Standards Group is? Oh, that's really good. We don't have to spend a lot of time there. That's fantastic. A little bit about the PKI industry as I view it. A little bit about what we've done in X9 with regard to PKI standards, and then I'm going to give you a quick history of how we got to the financial PKI, talk a little bit about the architecture, the audit program, and then we're going to do a summary. We're going to do a lot of Q&A. That's why I have Ralph up here to help me, because there's a lot of material here. There are some addendum slides. We're not going to go over those, but there's some structures about what is a subordinate CA, what is a bridge CA, what is a cross-reference CA, and so on. So we're not going to go over those. All right, X9 real quick. We are accredited by ANSI for financial services industry. We are the United States tag and a TC68. We are also the Secretariat. There are many groups out there that we interface with. We do work a little bit with Insights. We do interface with JTC1, which is information technology. You'll see that I've color-coded the financial folks in green. I thought that was appropriate. And TC68, X9. NIST is actually not only a standards body unto themselves, they are actually a member of X9, as in PCI, the Payment Card Council, of which Ralph is recently retired. So he knows a whole bunch about that. You can ask him all sorts of great questions. We also have the ITUT, the IETF, and the IEC, which is collaborating with ISO on the JTC1, and they're information technology. So they affect the financial services industry, but we need to make sure that we have our own stuff in place with our own security requirements. So many of you may not know that prior to the PKI consortium, there was another consortium called the PKI Forum. That whole purpose was to foster PKI technology. They were around for a while. Eventually, we folded it into OASIS, but they're well known for what we call the CA shootout. I'm not going to go into details here, probably shouldn't. But basically, there was a CA that was issuing really cheap SSL certificates. This is predating TLS. And the other CA organizations were rather upset because they weren't vetting the subject of the certificate. If you paid the bucks, you got the cert. They didn't care. And so there was a big issue there. The shootout was a special by an invitation only meeting. The DOJ got involved, and if y'all want to hear some more details, we can talk about that in the hallway. I mention this because out of that came a lot of things, I think, triggered some of the other things on the slide. So of course, we all know about the Web Trust for CA, which is the auditing standard. What you may not know is the auditing standard 0.1 was based on the X9 standard, PKI, and then it was upgraded to 2.0, which was based on the ISO standard 21188. I'll come back to that in a minute. Y'all know about the CA browser forum, and one of the things they did is they created something called the Extended Validation Certificate. I'm of the opinion that came right out of the CA shootout with the PKI forum. Now, I can't prove that, but that's my belief. The EU, of course, is doing qualified trusted service providers, and that's their version of the CAs. And then about that time, because of Brexit, the UK had to break away from the EU program, and they're running their own, the Open Banking Implementation Entity. So here I am over a financial institution going, okay, where do I begin? With regard to the X9 standards, again, abridged history, we actually developed a X9.55 certificate extension back in 1997. We did the X9.57 certificate management. Those two were submitted by the US to ISO TC 68 as a submission, and those two were folded together, and that was republished as ISO 15782. Sometime after that, we actually wrote X9.79, PKI policies and practices. Again, the US submitted it to ISO. It became an ISO standard 21188. And then just recently, they did a review of the two ISO standards, and they decided to merge them. So 15782 has now been retired, and everything is in ISO 21188. About that time, that other group, that JTC1, for technology, they said, this is really cool stuff, but your PKI standard doesn't have a lot to do with financial services. It's mostly information technology. We want your standard. And we said, no. We said, because if we give you the standard and you change the standard, then we're going to have to redo the standard for financial services. We've already got one. You guys go do what you want. But we did license the content of 21188, and they did publish their own, the 27099. And if you compare the two, they're probably 98% about the same. What do you think, Ralph? About 98%? Yeah, pretty close. So there are standards out there already with regard to PKI. Is that the next slide? Did it change? Yes. Okay. So what had happened at one of these FSISAC meetings that was mentioned earlier, somebody gave a presentation about the status of the PKI industry. And they had said, you know, things are happening in the industry like the CAB Forum and other things like that, and it's going to have a negative impact. I have a copy of that. There was no name on it. I don't know who actually presented it. I've gone to the FSISAC because we're a member, we participate, and I've asked them who gave this presentation, and they sort of don't know, which is really interesting. So if anyone knows who gave this presentation, I would like to talk to that person because they did an excellent job. This was brought forward to the X9. I contacted a few folks, including Ralph. We contacted Steve Stevens, the executive director of X9, and said, we got to do something. So we launched the PKI study group in X9. Now, this is a study group. This is not a work group. So anyone who wants to participate, anybody in this room can participate in the study group. You just go to that URL and you register and you can participate. So that's kind of a really cool thing. What we did in the study group is we put together a use case, and we identified at that time 27 use cases that were PKI related to the financial services industry. We then wrote up a series of recommendations. We presented that to the X9 Board of Directors. They approved it and said, move on to phase 2. We did. We then wrote a X9 certificate policy with the intent that somebody would issue a certificate according to that policy. And we wrote up a business case because we thought, you know, we really need our own PKI. We don't have one. So we presented that to the board. Again, they approved it. We moved into phase 3. And this is where we decided to write an RFP, go out to the industry, and solicit somebody to stand up and host the financial PKI. And so that RFP went out, and this is another reason I have Ralph on the table here. So we issued it to about how many people? Microphone.
We issued it to over 24 people, and we had 4 responding companies.
Right, but we only had 3 submissions. So we created an evaluation team of 6 individuals. 2 of them are on this stage. We did select the vendor. As of this morning, oh, and by the way, we began working on the master service agreement. My understanding is the MSA is done. All the legal folks have looked at it. Everyone's in agreement. But as of this morning, it is still not signed, so I can't tell you who we selected. Sorry. I wanted to. I was really hoping I could announce that today. But anyway, so we're moving forward. We're moving into phases 4 and 5. Phase 4, they're going to stand up a test route. It's going to be stood up this quarter of this year. That's the plan. And they're going to stand up an issuing CA based on one of those use cases, which, by the way, we've just revised it. We're going to come out with a new version. And Ralph, I think we have 34 use cases now?
Yes, because we had added some new ones.
Right. So we're up to 34, and that will be published, be publicly available. We will publish that. And then phase 5 is they're going to do a production route and a production issuing CA. And the reason that it takes a little bit longer, and we're hoping by the 3rd quarter of this year, but we're not sure if that's going to happen, is they have to go through the Web Trust for CA audit. So architecturally, it's going to look something like this. So we've chosen the PKI vendor. They're going to host the route and some number of issuing CAs. They're going to host the registration authority. They will maintain the repository and what the OSIP, the CRL and OCSP responder and all those things. So anyone who wants a X9 certificate, now this covers anyone in the financial services industry on a worldwide basis. That is the plan. So it could be an individual, it could be a merchant, it could be a small bank, it could be a large bank, it could be a service provider, could be a federal agency. Whoever wants to get one of these will go to the registration authority. They will register it. They will get back the X9 certificate. We will do all the appropriate due diligence, and then the relying party will receive that certificate, and then they can go to the repository to do the validation, and then we do our normal processing. So that architecturally, that's what we're trying to do. Now, here's the trick that we had to do. Normally, just in the black lettering, when a Web Trust for CA auditor comes in, they're going to sit down with the CA company and say, give us your CPS. We're going to look at your practices as you claim you do. And then the audit is a series of interviews and documentation reviews and testing, and they verify that they actually do their operations as they stated. Then step 3 is the auditor will provide an audit report that says, been there, saw it, looks good, you guys are done. We are adding step 2 in the middle, and we've already verified this with the audit, the AICPA, and a bunch of the audit companies that are out there, the audit firms. And before they issue the report, but they know that they're doing their operations according to their CPS, they're going to compare their CPS, the vendor CPS, with the X9 certificate policy. And they're going to opine whether they are compliant. If they are, then they're going to get the report, and the report's going to say, you are prepared for an X9, to issue X9 certificates. That will, of course, to go at X9, and then we'll have to figure it out because we're building all of this as we go. We're going to have a policy authority. And Ralph is going to be heavily involved in that, so you can ask him all sorts of questions afterwards. And then we will review the audit report. We will decide that we're good to go, and then that CA will get stood up. Right now, we're looking, probably most of them are going to be under that single vendor, but that's not a requirement. So we are thinking ahead. We are looking that there may be multiple routes, there may be multiple vendors. We don't know exactly where this is going to go. It's all brand new. So this is the quick summary. You can go, that URL actually doesn't work right now. X9 just went to a new website and they messed it up and it's not active. But I've been told it's going to get active up pretty soon. This is the general time frame. Like I said, the agreement is done. We're waiting for the final signature. There will be a release. There's probably going to be a press release. And then the plan is to stand up the test CAs, and then shortly after that, the production CAs. And then as we start building out each of those use cases, we're assuming that every one of them is going to be its own issuing CA. So with that, that is pretty much what I wanted to present, and we're more than happy to take any questions. How are we doing on time?
You're doing well on time. You're
My target was to get that done in 15 minutes. Did I make it?
plus or minus 2 minutes.
Not bad.
So if there's any questions in the audience, please come up to the mic and ask those questions. John, anything we've seen online yet? He's checking. So I think we have a question coming up here, so let's go in the room.
How does X9 envision the resulting end entity certificates and the relationship between the subscribers and relying parties for those end entity certificates to really put these to use? Are we thinking it's mostly for communication security? Are we thinking it's more for document provenance, transaction security, something else? How do we see these? What do we see the intended purpose?
Great question. The short answer to that is yes, all the above and more. We're looking at places where we have transaction communications. We're looking to secure individual messages. One of the use cases is to secure the new ISO 222 messages that are coming on board. One of our member banks has already built a gateway. They want to secure it using this particular PKI. We secure ATM machines. We secure point of sale machines. It'll be at the device level. It's big. If you look at those 34 use cases, which you can't see yet because we haven't published.
May I ask a follow-up?
Sure.
Do you foresee, you mentioned other financial institutions possibly becoming subordinate CAs. Do you see rules around constraining and tightening down what some branches of the PKI tree can and can't do, and what they can issue for or not for?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, another excellent question. One of the things I didn't mention that a lot of people ask us, and it's related to this, is, well, what does the CAB Forum think about you guys doing this? Well, we have members of the CAB Forum on this project. And basically, when we went to them and said, we want to do our own financial PKI, their response was, oh, thank God. Go away. Quit bothering us. So, yeah, they're fully on board on this. In fact, the chair of the study group is actually the chair of the CAB Forum, Dean Coughlin from DigiCert. So he's been heavily involved in this from the very beginning. But in particular to your question, what we're planning to do, and we haven't built this out yet, is through the standard, we have our own object identifiers. They're issued to X9 through ISO. We have a set of OIDs unique for every single standard that we write. We have a set of OIDs unique for this project. And what we're thinking about doing, and we haven't done this yet, is we would have a generic OID that says this is for the X9 financial PKI. And then each use case will have its own object identifier. And then what we're thinking is, for example, if you were doing a TLS and you wanted to use an X9 certificate, in addition to the 2 existing OIDs that are in there in the extended key usage, we would add a third OID that would be this specific use case, whatever it happens to be. And we're even contemplating of adding our own V3 extension in the certificate. It would be non-critical, of course, initially. And included in that would be the specific use case OID.
Excellent. So we have a couple questions online. Let's take one online, and then we'll come back to the other questions in the room.
Sure, Jeff, you've covered some of this, but I'll ask this particular question for your coverage. Can you just describe or cover some of the broad use cases for the X9 PKI?
Wow, there's so many of them. So for example, we got secure communications to ATMs, secure communications to point of sale. We've got transaction processes to load keys into those ATMs for PIN encryption, for point of sale for PIN encryption. Cash registers, merchant services. What am I missing? I mean,
Well, it would include signing software on devices that were specifically intended for financial services like ATMs and point-of-sale equipment.
yeah, there's a lot of them. I mean, and to be honest, I help write a lot of those, but I don't have them memorized. Like I said, we're up to 34 use cases already, and they're all relatively unique.
In the room here?
Starting out with a new PKI, is it going to start fresh?
Oh, excellent question. Thank you, because I meant to mention that. One of the requirements in the RFP that we put out is it must be PQC ready. So yes, we will have full board PQC available from the new CA. What we suspect is there's going to be cases where somebody wants these, but they're not ready, so they're going to want new legacy algorithms. Somebody wants these, but they want to do hybrids, so we're going to support that. Others want to go straight to PQC and not do any of this legacy stuff. So the idea is we're going to have to support all those, but again, that's going to be specific to each of the use cases.
A couple online here, and then we'll come over to you, Bruno.
Jeff, have any enforcement bodies shown interest in requiring utilizing this new PKI infrastructure?
Well, I'm not quite sure what they mean by an enforcement body. I assume they mean like a regulator, that kind of a thing. A lot of those organizations, like Federal Reserve Bank and Treasury, they are members of X9. They're fully aware of this. Outside of the X9 arena, this is probably the largest reveal we've done as far as the financial PKI going to exist. I did one of these at FSISAC earlier, late last year, and that was just the FSI members. So they were aware of it, and that's all your major banks.
And then one more question online before we go back to in person here. Can you just describe the difference between standard PKI and this new financial PKI?
Well, they're going to be X509 certificates, and we're assuming that they're going to be X509 Classic, meaning single key, single signature. It may be the Icera Catalyst, which we prefer to call Chimera, where I have 2 public keys and 2 signatures. We're planning, if the ITF continues down that path, we're going to support the composite certificates, and we're even planning to support the chameleon certificates and whatever else somebody thinks of that they want to use in the financial services industry. It's not meant to be restrictive, but you are right, we will have our own set of operating rules for the financial services that probably might be a little more flexible than others.
Room?
A particular point is that the CAB forum.
Didn't sound like your voice, Bruno.
Yeah, I'm sorry. The CAB forum was and has pushed toward having very short time frames for certificate life expectancy. And that had a very adverse impact in the payments space and in the financial services more generally. And so in that regard, one of the differences is going to be in the area that we'll have more flexibility in the life expectancies of certificates and in support for longer-lived public certificates versus private certificates in terms of validations.
Hey, Jeff. Thanks for the presentation. In light of having to support the variety of different certificate path with both classic crypto, PQC, hybrid, are you planning on having to design multiple routes that you're going to instantiate on day one and multiple CPs that will be kind of describing the ways of things to how things operate?
Not day one. Day one, we're going to have a single route, and we're planning on 2 of the issuing CAs.
Okay.
For production, then we're going to echo that. But as we see the need to grow more of these issuing CAs, I think it's most likely that we may decide to go with multiple routes. But in reality, because X9 is the governing body for this, we're not the operational CA. So the vendor that we've selected will have control over the operations. So if they want to stay with one route, if they want to go with 50 routes, that's an operational decision that they, I mean, we want them to tell us, of course. But yeah, we want them to manage this for us.
And have you started to explore the ultimate, 5 years down the road when, say, you use certain path to do device validation, firmware validation, and other use cases? Is there, in your opinion, a chance that one day you'll have a route that's a LMS and the subordinate CAs are using MLDSA, like the heterogeneous type? Or are you planning it's going to be straight pipe from certificate path? Just curious.
We haven't gotten that far
No?
yet.
All right. Thanks.
It's a great question, but yeah, we're expecting this thing to evolve, to grow. We're going to have to be flexible. It's all new, and that way we have the advantage of being flexible.
Online question, Jeff. Would this be similar to the OASIS structure of the route CA to subordinate banks with updates to the route at predetermined timeframes /events, and would there be additional attributes?
I'm not that familiar with the OASIS PKI. Are you, Ralph?
Not enough to comment on our differences.
Yeah, but I can give you one of the example. Ralph almost said it, and I'm going to go ahead and say it. So, for example, in the CAP forum, they're pushing really hard for 90-day certificates. We have a use case for ATMs where the ATM manufacturer actually installs an HSM, we call it a PIN encryption device, and they generate the key pair and the certificate, and it goes into the firmware of that device. Those devices, when they get deployed in the field, they typically have a 10-year life cycle in the field. We can't just rotate those certificates like that. That certificate and that ID is that device. So in that case, for that particular use case, it probably will have a 10-year life cycle, which means we have to look at the appropriate security and the size of the algorithm and the key strength.
Yeah, this next question actually kind of builds on that. There are several bodies, including PCI via the PCI/PIN audit, that govern CAs used in the payment space. Do you see yourself competing with these types of bodies, or you include those types of audits in your PKI?
There is no competition there whatsoever. Ralph is retired. He ran the PCI PIN assessment group. I'm the X9 representative to that group. So we're very much in lockstep. They're fully aware of what we're doing. And yeah, we would certainly work with them hand in hand on all these things.
Great, and I think that's it for questions. Ralph, Jeff, thank you very much. Do appreciate it.